Ejection. Ejector pin must be 156 thousandths of an inch or larger. Ejector pin holes in the ejector half of the mold shall be relieved 15 thousandths of an inch and fit to size 3/4 of an inch from the molded surface. Ejector pins shall have enough travel to completely eject the part off the core, and out of the mold. Forward stops should be placed near machine knockout locations. Ejector pins shall have relief through mold base beyond necessary bearing surface. Stand-alone molds are to have guided ejection unless deemed unnecessary and/or cost preventative relative to required annual part volumes. Mold maker will make suggestion based on mold construction. All molds are to have adequate ejector pin bearing surface, so as to allow pins to be installed into bearing surface while ejector return springs are in a free uncompressed state. Ejector pins are to have a minimum bearing surface of 1/2 an inch. Ejectors are to have spring return unless mold design dictates otherwise. Spring return must be inboard of the mold base if possible. Use standard English DME or equivalent core and ejector pins unless otherwise specified and/or approved. Metric components are not allowed, unless approved by Amer tool engineer. Blade ejectors are to be avoided. Blade type ejectors must be approved by Amer tool engineer before use. All ejector knockout clearance holes must be at least 1 1/8 an inch diameter. Knockout clearance holes for 500-ton plus tools must be 2 1/8 an inch. Molds having a condition whereby damage can occur if the pins are not completely back during mold closing, or otherwise necessary condition, will have 1/2 inch 13 NC threaded holes in the ejector plate so as to allow the ejector plate to be tied into the press. Ejector plates on mud molds must be retained, so that the ejector plate can't separate from the mold. This includes prototype molds. Core pins and contour ejector must be keyed to prevent rotation. Ejector sleeves to be used in all areas with bosses. All pins are to be numbered to assure proper placement when reassembling the tool. All molds, regardless of size, are to have 4 ejector plates guide pins with shouldered bushings. Stop buttons must be located directly under all return pins, and any large concentration of ejector pins and all mechanisms replace. There shall be a sufficient amount of ejection to allow part to fall freely and without marking, distortion or damaging it in any way. Core pins and contour ejector must be keyed to prevent rotation. Ejector sleeves to be used in all areas with bosses. All pins are to be numbered to assure proper placement when reassembling the tool. All molds, regardless of size, are to have 4 ejector plates guide pins with shouldered bushings. Stop buttons must be located directly under all return pins, and any large concentration of ejector pins and all mechanisms replace. There shall be a sufficient amount of ejection to allow part to fall freely and without marking, distortion or damaging it in any way. All molds must be fully automatic and freely eject parts from the tool with a single ejector stroke. Although secondary operations, e.g. robot, operator, etc., may be utilized, they are not acceptable for the tool to be considered approved. Return pins and support pillars. Each mold will have a minimum of 4 return pins and return pins to be proportionate to the size of the tool. Larger tools will require 6 return springs. Support pillars are to be attached to the rear clamp plate using a socket head screw. They are to be preloaded a maximum of 0.02 of an inch and located as near as possible to high land areas. Thank you for your time. My name is Amer Janineh and please watch my other mold design videos.